we've heard stories for a really, really long time, but the official line has always been denial.
Maybe had extraterrestrial origins by coming in on an asteroid and crashing into the Earth or something.
Oh,
I've heard theories like that, in that sense, we might all be somewhat aliens.
And I look up, and out the window, I could see this huge triangular shaped thing hovering above the house.
In the 10 or 12 feet between the house, I saw this flashing red light. And I looked over at it, and it just flew off into the sky.
Wow.
And I'm like, what the hell was that?
It's all just a simulation, and we know it.
Welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. And don't forget, you should hang out to the end because we write our own music. It's pretty awesome. And you can get it at patreon.com/KSM vidcast. I'm Casey Rochford.
And I'm Eric Rosenblatt.
Were you going to join us at some point?
Sorry, I was reading there.
What were you reading?
The Field Guide to UFOs.
They've kind of been in the news lately.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of stuff actually that, in fact, this is kind of a big deal that very few people are talking about, but in a sort of not really official way, I guess. The U.S. Navy is one of them. The Pentagon, some other government organizations in the U.S. have kind of admitted that the phenomenon is a real one.
And I think there's even they're declassifying, or they're admitting that they've heard from commercial airline pilots that strange things have been seen too.
Yeah. The thing is, we've heard stories for a really, really long time, but the official line has always been denial. Oh no, there's a rational explanation for that. It's not, spaceships or something like that. It's just weather balloons or ball lightning or something like that. There's always an explanation, which honestly, having looked into this a lot, because this is a subject that's kind of close to my heart. I'd say 95% of those sorts of UFO sightings are some sort of terrestrial, normal, everyday sort of thing. But there's some of them that don't have that kind of explanation. So it's rather interesting to see that there's a military, I guess the military sort of kind of, I guess, being a little more open about those things. And now we've seen there've been, I guess, what was it, 2017, I think, that some video footage was unearthed of fighter pilots trailing some kind of weird object that was going, moving at speeds that should be not possible with the technology we have today. And in fact, I guess the pilots even said in their reports, they said something about there being a second craft that was diving in and out of the water. And it's really interesting.
And wasn't it making 90-degree turns at Mach 3 or something that's totally impossible?
And that's the thing. It was, I don't want to say defying the laws of physics, but it was at least doing things that if you were inside that, you'd be turned to hamburger. So it's kind of interesting, and it makes me think, because I've read some things. Well, I've read a lot of things about UFOs and aliens and stuff. But one of the theories was that the engine that drives these craft, I guess let's just say that it's an actual thing, that they use some kind of interdimensional propulsion, where instead of just pushing through three-dimensional space like we have, our normal aircraft do, they kind of like jump from place to place by slipping through the fourth dimension or something like that. And that kind of brings me to the thought, like, a lot of people think, well, they must be aliens from another planet, which is, I guess it's possible, because now that we've studied things and looked, basically every star has planets around it. So I guess it's possible. But what if they're not from another planet, but from another dimension? Just they're from here in the solar system. It's just like another dimension over. That's a thought that's occurred to me.
That's an interesting one. Yeah. I mean, years ago, I thought about writing a book about, it was going to be like, and this has probably been done a million times. It was going to be about some spaceship that goes to another planet or whatever and starts to populate it. And it turns out that that's how humanity started or whatever, like we're actually from another world and we just forgot or something. I don't remember what premise I was going to use to explain it all away, but I was thinking of this idea of space travel that was like, you I don't know, it like accelerate the particles to such a degree that they like expand and then contract and expand and contract and like move across space that way, like without needing massive amounts of fuel or the ability to like, exceed light speed per se, but you just like make it so that you're taking up more space in less amount of time. I don't know, like maybe weird things like that would be possible in some other dimension or
sure. And people have hypothesized things like, excuse me, like a black hole drive or something like that you could utilize that to move very quickly. Of course, the amount of energy required is kind of staggering. I don't know that that's a practical portable thing you could have. But yeah, there's a lot of potential possibilities there that hi.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly fun to think about and try to think of like scientific plausibilities and things like that. I tend to be more on the skeptical side of things, but I do admit that the presence of alien life elsewhere in the universe is a far cry more likely, in my opinion, than like a deity or what most people consider the idea of a deity to be. It's very possible that there is an actual deity that's just an alien.
That's what I was going to say, and we probably should. That might be something that could be its own episode. Actually,
it certainly could.
Yeah. And the idea of I kind of like the idea that you'd mentioned earlier about there being human beings being kind of like seeded here or maybe they crashed here a long time ago, spacefaring people exploring, and they crashed, and here we are. That we could be the product of that.
There's a theory that's, not that out of this world, no pun intended, that like some of the bacteria or whatever that kind of integrated with our development and contributes to our digestion and all that stuff, maybe had extraterrestrial origins by coming in on an asteroid and crashing into the earth or something. I've heard theories like that in that sense we might all be somewhat aliens.
Well, that's very possible. That's an interesting theory, actually. I like that. That and I just remembered something. When I was talking about the interdimensional travel and all that, it's something that's really hard for people to wrap their heads around, this whole like fourth plus dimension kind of thing. But there's a brilliant book that everybody should read. It's really small, easy to read, and it illustrates this concept perfectly. And it kind of makes it easier to imagine something beyond three dimensions. It's called Flatland by Edwin Abbott. And it's a really old book, but in Flatland, there's people, of course, as the name implies, they live in two dimensions, and that's all they know. And a three-dimensional being kind of like enters that world and interacts with them and stuff, and chaos ensues. It's really, really interesting book, but everybody should read it. That's my book recommendation.
That's very interesting. That's creative. I like that.
Yeah, it's a good, because the thing is, it's really hard to imagine those sorts of things, and this takes it down below us. So now we can imagine that, and then by extension, kind of imagine upward by taking that kind of logic and applying it in the other direction. So it's pretty cool.
So you mentioned that this is, a very close personal topic. Why don't you speak to that a little bit? What is it that makes it so personal?
Well, okay. This will be a bit of a story. Actually, there's there's a story, and then there's kind of just retelling something that my mom told me. And maybe I'll start with that. So many years ago, my mom told me about a time when I was just a few years old, so I could barely talk, and not very advanced yet. So we were staying at my grandparents' house in Gig Harbor, and it's pretty much out in the woods. There's, at the time at least, there was just trees everywhere and stuff. So that's where their house was, and I was sleeping in a bed in like a guest room or whatever. And I guess my mom said that in the middle of the night, she was awoken to me like screaming super loud. So she came rushing in thinking like something awful was happening, right? And she came into the room, turned the light on, and I'm sitting up in bed looking at this giant window that looked out into the darkness. So there's nothing out there because it's dark. But I'm pointing at the window, and my mom was like, "What's going on? What, are you okay?" And all I said to her was, "Owl hurt man." And she's like, "Well, I don't know what that was," but then I went back to bed and everything was fine. And thinking about it years later, I was like, "What was that? Why would I say that?" And I, it sort of connects to this kind of in a way, because I was thinking, if you're a little kid, what sort of terminology do you have at your disposal if you're trying to describe something weird? Was it like a Yeti or a ghost or just somebody walking around? Well, it was dark, so I don't know how I would have seen it. Or was it an alien of some sort? The classic grays, like they kind of look like owls, and I don't know. It's a really weird thing. It gives me chills thinking about it. I don't remember that incident, but it's kind of freaky.
Yeah.
The second one, this is much more concrete, I guess. Probably, I want to say it was probably 1996, somewhere around there. I was living at my parents' house, and so for a time leading up to this particular incident, I would wake up in the middle of the night with this sense that something was watching me, that like weird sense, but it was like really intense. Like I thought for sure there was something out there, out the window looking at me. So I, was freaking out about it.
You're being attacked by a gray right now.
Yeah, I know. Luckily it's a friendly attack. So but I had this, every time, the same time every night, I would wake up with this feeling I was being watched and kind of this feeling of terror. Now, keep in mind, I'm not prone to any kind of psychological disorders or hallucinations or anything like that. Like that kind of thing doesn't happen. So this is what makes it so unusual. But at any rate, one night, another one of these nights, I woke up, same sort of feeling, and I was kind of freaking out. And I had this clock radio by my bed, and I would listen to classical music and stuff like that. So it was usually tuned to that station. And to kind of calm myself down, I just turned on the radio, and it was static. And I was like, freaking out even more at this point. So I start tuning it, thinking, oh, it just got off track or something. The whole FM band was static. Everything was static. There was no radio at all. And as I'm fidgeting with this clock radio, I saw a flash kind of off my peripheral vision. And I look up, and out the window, I could see this huge triangular shaped thing hovering above the house, like drifting very, very slowly. And it had a light in each corner and a light in the center that was kind of strobing in a really intense way. And it was just drifting away from the house. And eventually it kind of went over the trees and disappeared, just gone. And I watched it the whole time. I was like, just riveted, like, oh my God, what is this? And then I sat there for a minute thinking about it. And then I got up and I went downstairs, and my dad had woken up and was making coffee or something like that. I was like, Dad, I just saw some kind of craft floating above the house. And he's like, oh, you were just imagining things. And so he was thinking, oh, you're just dreaming or something like that. But no, I mean, that was a real thing that I actually saw.
He's part of the cover-up.
Exactly. He must be one of the men in black. Oh my God, it's in my family. But it was a rather unusual experience. And the funny thing is, after that, I did actually go to the library and grab every book on UFOs that I could find and read them, and studied a lot of stuff, because I thought, I don't know what this phenomenon is, but this is a thing I saw, and I want to know more about it. But the interesting thing is, after that, that was the last time I saw anything like that or had any experience like that. It was really weird.
Huh.
So
yeah, when I was in, I don't know, the fourth grade or something, 89, 90, something like that, I was sitting on the couch reading a book, and we had this kind of the house like protruded out into the front yard a little bit, so it was like windows all around and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like surrounded by windows with my back to the windows, and out of my peripheral vision, and the window right next to the neighbor's house, in the 10 or 12 feet between the house, I saw this flashing red light. And I looked over at it, and it just like flew off into the sky.
Wow.
And I'm like, what the hell was that? What the hell could be that tiny and flying quietly? Like, all I saw was a light, though. I don't know what shape surrounded it or anything. I just saw a blinking red light fly up into the sky and disappear. And who knows? This is way before drones. I mean, at least before we knew about drones, I guess. So it's possible that they were in production, just like, the cell phone was actually made in the 70s, but nobody knew about them until like the 80s, and even then it was a rare few. So it's possible that drones did exist back then. I'm not denying that, but it is weird.
Yeah, well, that is very strange. And anybody could sit and come up with an alternative explanation to everything. Mine would be a little difficult, but in your case, you could say, well, what if it was an RC helicopter or something? But it is interesting. And having looked into this, I read a lot of books that had people's personal accounts of things that happened to them and that they saw. And this is not a rare phenomenon. A lot of people have seen stuff in the sky. And not only that, it's not just a matter of seeing craft in the sky or strange objects or lights or whatever, but people there are tales of people actually interacting with beings and being taken aboard and stuff like that, the abduction stories and everything. And it's fairly common, surprisingly.
Yeah. You know, the one thing that I'm wondering about, though, just talking about our respective experiences, is that, you know, let's assume that when people see these things, that they are actually things, you know, and they're not just products of your imagination. Why are they so diverse in shape and size and, you know, the way people experience them? Sometimes there's flashing lights, like sometimes there's just bright lights, sometimes there's no lights, they're spherical, they're, you know, flying saucers, they're triangles, always with the triangles. So why, like, if they were aliens, probability would state that it's likely to only be one alien species that we would be interacting with, you know.
Yeah. If they're coming from another star system or something like that,
right? So why would they have so many different ship styles? That would just
I guess imagine if you could explain that by saying something like, well, we have the same thing. There's a diversity of aircraft that we have, and a diversity of beings, that, you know, humans and stuff. We look different and things like that. So it kind of,
but we're not like, we're talking about sending somebody out as an exploration or whatever. Why would you send like a huge diverse fleet of things?
yeah
And not just like a scout ship or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. And I guess it sort of lines up more with the interdimensional theory, that what if there was, say, another parallel planet full of these beings, and they somehow discovered a way to slip through into our dimension and explore. Well, they'd come in all forms, and maybe they're coming from a couple different places. Who knows what another universe or a parallel dimension would look like. So that's kind of that's the angle that I sort of lean to, is like, I don't think that it would be like space aliens or explorers from another planet. I would think in this sense, given the information, especially the propulsion systems, that it could possibly be something from a parallel dimension. The type of propulsion that that sort of, it kind of falls in line with that theory, I guess. If you can command some kind of interdimensional propulsion system, well, then of course you could slip between dimensions easily at that point.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And again, it's like, I don't really know what it is. I do know for a fact that there's something weird, some weird stuff going on that isn't imagination. You know, if that thing that I saw was my imagination, if I just hallucinated it or something, well, why haven't I hallucinated anything else? Why just that one thing? You know, that one time, and why was it so specific? It's very weird.
Well, you are under this delusion that you have a YouTube channel, and you go around telling everybody that you've got all these awesome episodes. And
yeah,
I hate to break it to you, but you're imagining that stuff.
It's all just a simulation, and we know it. Yeah.
So why don't we talk about the other, just as possible explanation that these are just maybe, I don't know, Russian experimental craft, or even our own government. But then why would they be like, hey, we don't know what's going on either?
Well, it's a secret, of course, and that is a possibility. There's a lot of really unusual things that are being developed. Area 51. I don't want to get all like Area 51, but that is a thing. It's a research facility, and there's several others, not just in the U.S. but across the world, developing really experimental systems. So yeah, it totally could be something, and maybe it ties in with something else. Maybe the whole abduction thing is real, and there's some sort of, I don't know, product of MK Ultra or something that are like causing people, inducing hallucinations using some kind of energy, I don't know, microwaves or whatever, to conceal that. That's a thought. But yeah, I think that a lot of things that people see, absolutely. In fact, all of the weird UFO, a lot of the really strange UFO sightings throughout like the 50s and 60s were actually experimental aircraft.
Yeah.
And probably to this day, I don't know.
Like the SR-71
Mhm.
Blackbird or whatever,
Yeah,
like looked
that was one.
super weird, and people were like, "What the hell is that?"
The F-117A too.
Yeah.
The
Well,
stealth
and then
fighter.
drones, like
Mm-hmm.
uh, say I did see a drone in '89 or whatever, like that certainly would freak somebody out. Like, or
Yeah.
imagine you're in 1950s suburbia and a drone drops an Amazon box on your front porch. You're probably never going to leave your house again.
Exactly.
But now we just see these things in the sky and we're like, oh, somebody's got a drone.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Whatever.
yeah, and the whole like Roswell thing, I think, could be possibly explained as it being some sort of experimental project. The whole recovering alien bodies. Well, they did use dummies in some of these experimental aircraft, for obviously for the purposes of testing for human occupants and things like that. So, and if it's a secret project, well, of course, there's going to be, the military is going to show up and try to reclaim it and keep it under wraps. They don't want that getting out because the communists or something might discover it.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
a big deal back then.
Just because something is a secret doesn't mean it's the secret you think it is.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, exactly. There are different explanations for things, but there's still a few outliers that kind of defy that. There's things that can't really be explained that way, or haven't yet been explained that way, and I think that's the stuff that's the most interesting. I mean, this leads into all kinds of weird subjects, talking about experimental programs and things. Like you could go into the Philadelphia experiment and
yeah.
other such things that are really interesting. So yeah, I mean, that there's so many things. I don't know. What's your take on it? What do you think?
So, well, I think I was starting to touch on this, but I got distracted. While I think it is certainly possible that there's other life out there, I find it highly improbable that there would be any interaction between our two worlds. And I'm just speaking about our dimension and space travel,
Yeah,
as we understand it. When it comes to the whole other dimensions thing, that's, to me, that's just like theoretics and stuff like that.
sure.
We don't have, we've not gone exploring other dimensions, but we have gone exploring space. So I think we
Yeah,
can speak to that better.
sure.
Um, and we know it's a thing. So
Mhm.
the vastness of space is mind staggering.
Yeah,
Like people are so used to seeing not to scale drawings of our solar system and think that there's this equidistant kind of tiny gap between each of the planets and that's it, but it's
there's
really
most.
massive, and that's just
Yeah.
our solar system.
Oh,
and
exactly.
and we've been exploring these planets in our solar system bit by bit, and we've been looking at Mars really hard, trying to find some kind of anaerobic bacteria that we can be like, woohoo, there's life. And
Mhm.
we haven't even been able to really fully discover, I mean, liquid water even. We're getting
Yeah.
close to that, but it's things like that are like really exciting and cool and
Hmm.
fun to think about the possibilities of what is out there. But that said, I just don't think we're being visited, because if we were, I think it would be too hard to keep secret. You know,
Yeah.
I think they would be like trying to be like, you know, if I traveled millions of light years to make contact with a species and they were trying to keep it secret from the rest of the people, I'd be like, I came all this way. I want to be known. I would just go make myself known to the people. You know,
Yeah.
like I would just walk down Fifth Avenue in New York and be like, hey, I'm an alien. What's up? You know, who's going to stop me? I'm the one
Yeah,
who
well, that's a
got
good
here
point.
so I can kick your ass.
Yeah.
Like,
I, that that's absolutely. And well, so how would you explain, assuming that's the case, how would you explain the vast number of sightings that people have had, all of these things that people have seen? um, where does that come from? If it isn't, if it isn't like space aliens, then what is it?
mhm. So, putting aside the large number of obvious hoaxes,
Hmm.
um, there's plenty of, you know, type 1 and type 2 errors in reasoning. Um, you know, the mind fabricates patterns. You know, it's an evolutionary throwback that helped us survive in the fields and the plains when there were predators and stuff like that.
It still helps us survive today. We just use
Exactly.
it differently,
Yeah.
and it has its flaws. Yeah, certainly there could be things that don't exist that are imagined as a result of that,
Yeah.
or
So
remembered differently, let's say.
right. And it's not even that something doesn't necessarily exist. It's just that what you're seeing is being interpreted incorrectly.
Yeah,
Or,
because
you know, like if you see like a meteorite enter the atmosphere, you could easily be like, was that some kind of lit up spacecraft? Or,
yeah,
um, there's a lot of different things. I mean, I don't know. Things could even bounce off the atmosphere and do some kind of 90-degree thing at a massive speed and look like it was doing crazy turns and was some kind of lit up ship. But I don't know what altitude these sightings were at. So,
yeah.
um,
Well, the military ones were like at sea level,
oh, yeah.
so the that was a little unusual. There's a lot of accounts actually. There's some that are even more fantastical than that. Um, yeah, I really don't know. I mean, I agree with you that a lot of stuff could be the product of the way our brains work when you're not fed complete information. You know, there's holes in things, so you fill it in, and what you fill it in with is imaginary. So certainly that could be a thing. I don't know. I guess I don't know. I really don't know what it is, but it still fascinates me to no end. I can't get
Yeah.
enough of that.
And like when it comes to abductions,
Hmm.
I've always thought, you know, especially these days when we have pretty advanced scientific testing, wouldn't it be possible to do some kind of forensic analysis on these people who claim that they've been probed in some way or exposed to, you know, an alien environment, you know, because I mean, let's face it, if they're brought aboard an alien ship from another planet, their um, optimal breathing uh, atmosphere conditions are not going to match ours very likely,
Sure.
right? You know, like the concentration of nitrogen and oxygen and things like that would probably be different, if not vastly different, like different components altogether.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You'd
things like
imagine it
that
would be
would, you
that.
know, probably be detectable in your blood. You know,
Yeah. Well,
there
and
there would
maybe
be
they.
there would be ways to see. I think
Yeah.
that,
I
you know,
don't
something
know.
definitely weird happened.
Yeah, and I don't know that that's actually, maybe that's been done somewhere and I haven't really heard about it, but that is something that probably should be done if somebody has these kinds of claims. The thing is, I think a lot of science in general is a little resistant to studying these kinds of topics because they see them as a little bit woo.
Mhm.
And a lot of people are not, it takes them a long time to come forward because of the stigma attached. If you say, oh, you know, I was abducted and probed by aliens, people are going to make fun of you. So some of these people never come forward, or they come forward decades later and say, well, yeah, this thing happened to me.
Well, yeah, I get that, but I mean, there's ways around that. Like, if I were abducted, I know that people would think I was crazy if I said I was abducted. But let's say there was an anal probe, you know, just throwing out the you know the tried and true anal probe.
Mhm.
There would probably be some rupturing of the anal lining or something.
Yeah.
I would go to a doctor and be like, there's some pain in my rectum. Can I have this checked out? And they'd be like, okay, you know, and they'd look in there and they'd probably be like, what the hell? Uh, what, what kind of hobbies do you have? And you know, and I'd be like, well, what is it you're seeing? Like, what do you think could have caused what you're seeing? You know, and just start with no assumptions and don't give people any ideas and see what they find, you know.
Well,
And
and
you know, then they have to like come up with an explanation, and then you can be like, well, I didn't mention this at the start, but I did have a weird experience. And then, you know, you can build people into it. You know,
sure.
you don't have to come out and be like, woo, I saw an alien and it took me up and it stuck something in my butt and now I can do the
Well,
maths.
I don't, and that's good advice, actually. I think that that's probably something that a lot of people don't think about, that they don't, people don't generally think in such logical ways, especially if you've had some kind of traumatic thing happen to you.
That's true.
So for the future, I think this is good advice for anybody that's had a similar experience. Try that, like go through that process immediately.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea. I have, in reading some of the books that I read about abduction experiences, the, people have been studied and some strange anomalies have been found. Um, Obviously, I rented those from the library, so I don't have them at my disposal. But there were some studies conducted, and I think a few times strange, unexplainable things were present. But you know, it's been a couple decades since I've read those books, but I do remember that part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Huh.
and I think maybe those two experiences kind of get put together in the same box, and maybe they're not the same phenomenon. The whole abduction thing versus seeing UFOs. I think it's very easy to say, oh, well, that's the same thing, but there's no evidence for that. In fact, there's not a lot of evidence for any of it, other than people's experiences and the occasional photograph, or you know, the leaked military video from a fighter jet, which that was really interesting, by the way. And it's not just the
Yeah.
U.S. There's other countries. I saw a video. I think it was the Mexican Air Force or something released a video, and they were trailing a series of aircraft over the ocean, and that was a really interesting one too. So
Huh.
yeah, I think this is a massively interesting topic. However you believe on it, I think everybody really enjoys the
Yeah.
topic of
It
UFOs.
is fun. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I'd like to hear people's stories on this. Like, if anybody's had the same kinds of experiences, or you know, you think you've been abducted, or you've seen a UFO. Um, you know, I'd like to hear it, um, because to me, I love this. It's a really big deal.
Yeah. Even being a skeptic, I still really enjoy these kinds of stories and topics. It's just fun, you know. And I'm a Star Trek fan, and you
Yeah.
know, like some of the coolest episodes, like one of the coolest episodes had to be that one where everyone was like really tired and weird stuff was happening and like
Oh,
time was disappearing, and then they did like a sleep study basically, and they were being like sucked into this like weird dimensional hole thing, and these like things, like Mick Jagger was wearing some alien costume
Oh.
and like,
Yeah, the clicking. Yeah, like
yeah.
more clicking when they. Oh, that scene.
That was such a creepy episode. It was so
Oh
good.
man, that wigged me out so much. Oh, that was
Yeah.
a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, like it's fun. It's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's no harm in playing around
Sure, sure.
with an idea, and you know, if it is true, how cool would that be? Like
Oh,
other species that we can make to feel like shit and try to control, and you know.
I think it'd be the other way around, judging based on their technological advancement. But yeah, I mean, it would be really interesting. I really seriously hope that it is a real thing, and there are beings from some other place, whether it be another dimension or another planet. Like, I want to see that in my lifetime. I just that'd be so, except wait, okay, no, not if it's like War of the Worlds or something where we're running and getting vaporized by them. Like, and I don't want that kind of scenario. You know, maybe a little more friendlier one. Like if it's Vulcans or something, I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You certainly don't want to just up and vanish. That would really suck.
No, that would be terrible.
So I don't know. I guess with that might be all the time we have for the day. So if you've got some UFO stories that you want to share with us, that would be really awesome. We'd love to read about those, and maybe we'll do a show and have you on, and you can talk about it, and we can theorize what might have happened. But in the meantime, why don't you like and share and subscribe? That would be really awesome of you. We're on social media. Find us on Facebook and all that good stuff. And, thanks for deep sink diving with us. And, have a good night. And what is going on?
What the?
Okay. I guess they took him home. All right. I guess that's that. See ya.